My name is Stephen Cleary, and this is Clearly Coding. And today I'm going to be working on a new library that focuses on capturing contexts for exceptions when they're logged. And so I'm going to go through a quick example to show what the problem is first, and that this library is trying to solve. And then then we'll get started. I've got quite a bit built out here. Just in terms of project structure, this is all just, I don't know if boilerplate's quite the right word, but I've got, a build coming for GitHub Actions, and it's all set up to publish. I've got a Nito.Logging. This is like a meta package, because I'm planning to do some other work in the logging space as well. And the one that we're working on today is specifically this one here, the Nito.Logging exception context. And so I've got a bunch of boilerplate stuff here, got an icon, set up some unit tests. I have some utility stuff that I wrote earlier this week that I expect to use for the unit tests, but I haven't actually written any unit tests yet. So we're starting completely from scratch as far as the tests themselves go. So what does this package actually do? I'm going to jump over to an example here, and this example code is probably sooner or later I'm just going to delete it from the repository. But for now, it's here mainly for this live coding exercise to illustrate what the problem actually is. So I've got here a .NET Core worker service, and it's all standard, except I changed the worker a bit. So if you look in the program here, this is all the default stuff. It's got a default builder, adds one hosted service. This is all in the template, the standard template. And then in this worker, normally there's like a loop here in this execute async where, it just says, while it's still going, then just display a log. Well, I've changed this a little bit to illustrate what the problem with exceptions and logging contexts is. So let's pretend here that we've got some important piece of data that we want to attach to all of our logs. The normal way you do that is to call begin scope. So you've got some correlation ID or a request URL or something that is very useful when you're looking at these logs to say, okay, this is the context in which this happened. So I've got these two things are pretty much just unrolling this this loop a couple times. The standard boilerplate loop saying, hey, I'm still running. It delays another second. Hey, I'm still running. Oh, I forgot. Feel free to ask any questions in chat or on Twitter. I should be monitoring them both, and I will try to answer them live as I go through this. I know a lot of people are not watching this live because it's kind of early for most of the country in the US. Yeah, if you do have any questions, go ahead and ask them, and I will respond. Thank you, Dan, for your recommendation already. So we've got just a couple log messages here, and then I'm going to throw this exception. We run into some kind of problem that says, oh, we ran into this, some kind of an exception here, and I have to throw. Now, a lot of code, and this is true, .NET Core, for example, has like exception handling middleware, right? And usually that's placed very early in your pipeline so that it catches all the problems that can happen and, logs them, does something with them. And so that's what this try catch up here is kind of representing. It's like something very high level. This is something happened at a very high level in the app, or very early on in the pipeline, middleware pipeline, and says, all right, we're going to grab this exception and we're going to log it. We're going to, and then, do whatever. Here I just throw it again. Now, if I run this worker service, we'll see the problem illustrated here. In a moment. Okay, so we've got a couple info messages, and then we have that exception. So we've got the the thing that is notable here is this this work item 13 here. Oh, I did actually change one other thing in that worker service, and I'll show that in a moment. Normally, the console logger does not include logging scopes. Other loggers do, but the console logger does not. So you have to turn that on in like the logging JSON in your app settings. But once you turn that on, then you can get this. Hey, here's this work item 13. That's the context that we need to know. All right, so this thing happened within the context of this request 13 or whatever. And then we've got another message that also has that same context. And then when we have our exception, which is, the things that we're normally looking at in the logs are, oh, this exception happened. All right, we need more information about this exception. What request did this exception happen in? No idea, because that information's gone. There is no work item 13 here in this log message. This is a completely separate log message, and we don't have that contextual information. And the reason for that, if you're looking at the code, all in one method here, the reason for that is pretty obvious, that we have this begin scope here. It's in a using block. Now when it's outside of this block, that scope is no longer there. And then our log error is at a much higher level in the application, so we don't, it's not in that scope. It doesn't see that scope. So there are, different ways to work around this. Just as a side note, if you're not that familiar with logging scopes or semantic logging, definitely take a look at that because they are amazing. What most modern logging systems allow you to do is to say, so this logging scope is not just adding a string and an additional string to the log. For the console logger, that's what it does. But you're more advanced, anything more advanced than that. So if you're logging to seq, SEQ, or if you're logging to Graylog, or if you're logging to Application Insights, or if you're logging to Datadog, or pretty much any modern logging system has semantic logging support. And what this will actually do is it will create a field, like an extra field on your log message called work item ID with the value 13. And then your modern logging systems allow you to filter on this, run analytics on this, so the filtering allows you to say, okay, so we had an exception for work item ID 13. What were all the other logs for work item ID 13? And then analytics and things like that allow you to say, well, how many how many exceptions are for different URLs, for example, if you're capturing your URLs as a scope data. So this is a really powerful technique for making your logs much, much easier to use. And this is modern semantic logging. So the problem here is this exception doesn't get logged with this scope. Now there are some workarounds that sometimes people try to do with this. Sometimes there's like we should then do a log and throw, right? So they'll introduce some kind of log and throw method and say everyone should use this method, which essentially does this. You end up with something like this. Oh, well, this is in a separate method for this kind of an approach, and then it would say. Now we can just toss that in. I guess it needs a message. And then we throw it. So usually there's some kind of method that'll say, okay, log and throw. Now this will actually work in this case. So this will give an example of what we want our logs to look like here when I run this. And here we have a couple of info logs. They both have that work item 13. And now we do have an exception log with that work item 13. A few things that we don't have are the stack trace because the exception hasn't actually been thrown yet. And then we also have this additional error log that's still being done at the top level that does not have that work item 13 extra contextual information. But this is essentially what we want in our logs. We want this exception with this contextual data. Now the problem with this kind of an approach is that first off, you have to use this, you have to use your log and throw method everywhere. And secondly, and people are going to miss it, right? People are not used to calling log and throw instead of just throwing an exception. And the other problem is that a lot of third-party code or even BCL code is not going to do that. If you have a dictionary key not found exception, well, they're not going to call your log and throw. So then to work around that, sometimes you have to do, essentially every time you have a begin scope, then you end up with a try catch and do all the logging in there. And that just ends up being unmaintainable. At that point, you're growing into something that that isn't clean, it's not maintainable. So this library that I'm going to write today is going, if I can get it working, is the idea behind it is it's going to, anytime an exception is thrown, it's going to actually capture the current scope, and it's going to apply that to this exception. It's going to essentially save it on the exception. I was thinking of putting it on the data property, but I think I'm going to use ephemerons instead. I think that would be cleaner. And then when it's logged later, it's going to include the scopes in that log. Now, the way that I want to do this is to actually work with any logging provider. Yeah, I want it to work implicitly on any logging provider. So there's no extra code in your logging here, like with exception logging or anything like that. What I'd like to do is have like one line of code in this configuration that says essentially capture logging scopes for exceptions or something like that, and then it'll just be automatically turned on. None of this code has to change at all. That's the goal. All right, I think I can do this, but we'll see. So I've got some notes here that I wrote up about how we want to implement this. So there's a few different pieces that I'm thinking of. So first off, in order to actually capture the scopes, there's no way to say, give me all the current logging scopes. Instead, the way that the Microsoft logging works is there's a bunch of providers, and then when you call .begin scope, then there's like this there's like a multi-logging. I don't know what the type is actually called, but inside of Microsoft logging, that then when you call begin scope here, when our the consuming code calls that, it actually calls begin scope on every logger for all of the different logging providers. And so we can use that to track the scopes, and that's really the only way to get the current scope, is to write your own logging provider. So that's what this is, the idea here. So I'm going to have a logging provider, and its only job is actually tracking scopes. It's not actually going to log anything. It's a logging provider. And so that should just give us access to the current scope. And I've been going back and forth a couple ways on how to represent that scope. This is what I was thinking originally, but what I'm actually thinking now is like a scope and a generic derived scope class instead of that immutable dictionary. And it's hard to describe in words, but the code will come soon. So I think I'm going to start with this provider that only will give us the current logging scope. And then so I want like probably a different type to do like all the exception extensions. So to say, this exception has a logging scope, and to put it on there or to get it back off. And then we'll need an actual registration to hook all that up. And then finally, I have this on here as an iLogger extension, but I don't think that was my original idea. I don't think I'm going to do it as an iLogger extension now. I'm actually going to do this as a logger provider wrapper. So the idea behind the logger provider wrapper is I want to like make it implicit. I don't what I want to avoid. So my original idea was something like this: dot underscore logger dot with exception scopes, something like that. So you'd have to do this every time you called log error. Well, I thought that this was too. I don't think we have to do this. Instead, what I'm thinking now is during that configuration, I'm actually going to take all of the existing logger providers and make wrapper logger providers around them that will actually automatically apply any scopes for any exceptions passed into those logs. So that's my current thought. We'll see if that works. And that's a fair amount to actually get to something that is working, so we better get started. All right, I'm going to start with this scope provider idea. Yeah. So this is going to be a logging provider. I've got an internals directory over here because most everything, I mean, really the API for this library is going to be one method call, ideally. So what do I want to do this? Scope tracking logger provider. Sure. And this will be this is oh boy, I can't remember who said that term, but there was there's a technique where you essentially put your, instead of having internal classes, because normally this would be like an internal class, but I really dislike internal classes because the idea is if I find a class useful, then someone else will also find that class useful. So what I've started doing as kind of a pattern is to do a public class instead of like an internals namespace. So the namespace should be an indication that, hey, this isn't, this is not included in the semantic versioning of this package. This can change. But if you really want to use it, then you can. And somebody at Microsoft was like, oh yeah, because they had a name for it called pubternal, or is what they call them. So it's like a type that really should be internal, but it's probably would be useful for other things. So you make it public, but it's not like really public. Yeah. So let's see. A logging provider that just tracks scopes. And I want, let me see. So async local is just necessary for proper scope tracking. And then inside of that we have a stack. It's immutable because everything in async local should be immutable. So it's an immutable stack, and this stack is going to be all the different scopes, because you can call begin scope inside of a begin scope inside of a begin scope. So we build up a stack of those scopes. And like I mentioned down here, I'm not going to use an immutable dictionaries. Instead, I'm just going to capture the scope. Scopes in Microsoft Logging are a little bit weird. And here's an example of this. So here's a logging provider that I wrote. And this is just an in-memory, here's the things that were logged. I'm planning to use this to write some unit tests. And I also did it to kind of remind myself how logging providers work, because it's not obvious. So when you have a logging provider, it all comes down to this logger, and when you begin scope, it's actually a generic method that just passes in an object of its generic type, which is really weird. I shouldn't say really weird. It avoids boxing if you have if you're just passing in a value type, but how many people are going to begin scope 13? That doesn't mean anything. So I don't really see the value of this particular design. And this isn't the only instance of that. If you look at log up here, this message, it takes a formatter function, And this formatter actually always ignores its exception parameter, which is interesting. It's just like a holdover of when they were still developing the API and then they forgot to kind of clean it up or something before they released it. I don't know. Anyway, so that's beside the point. That doesn't have anything to do with today's work. But the point is, the logging provider API is just not, it just doesn't feel quite right. Like it's not quite finished. But, I mean, it's set in stone at this point. So we've got this begin scope, and what I'm thinking is I'm going to capture these states. Now what I'm thinking is I'm going to capture these states directly. What I was thinking was using something like this. Now this is based off of a blog post from, sorry, I don't remember his name. Nicholas Bloomhart. And this is the best blog post to understand how begin scope actually works. And so this just uses the technique in that blog post, rather simplified, to pull the structured data out of whatever your logging scope is. So, for example, in our worker, when we call begin scope and we pass this in, this scope utility here would be able to pull out a key value pair, string to object, which is actually work item ID 13. So I was planning to like pull all that data out and do it that way, but I'm thinking actually now that it would be better just to save the scope objects themselves. And so, actually in order to do that, I need to do that scope and scope of T thing. So let me do that type first. So this is just going to be a captured scope, sure. And then I'm gonna do and then this is just the generic one that's going to hold a one of those T state values. And so this is just also just a captured scope. Okay, so do I ever want that settable? Probably not. This is really supposed to be like an immutable type, but the whole point of this is I'm actually kind of doing like a manual boxing of that T state, and in a way that guarantees reference equality, because that's going to become important later when we try to apply these scopes. Alright, what do we got here? Fine, I'll just initialize it from the constructor. Alright. So we've got that scope now, and what we want to track is actually something like this. Oh, I don't have immutables installed. That's because I'm searching in installed things. All right. All right. Now, pull that in for me. Thank you. All right. Private read only. Well, we want one per logger provider, so this is not going to be static. And this, we don't want the immutable dictionary anymore. Instead, we're going to be capturing those scope things that I defined. And I'm just going to call this captured scopes. Alright, let's see here. What else do I need? Oh, of course, this is going to implement iLogger provider. So let's just go ahead and do that. I may not have that either. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Let's pull in logging. That should be in logging abstractions. I'm not sure if we'll actually need a full logging package or not. For now, I'm just going to do abstractions. I always read through the license agreements because that's important. And pull that in. Let's implement this. Yeah. Eventually I might want to dispose there, but for now it's just going to be no op. And then the logger. So let's create a nested class that derives from logger. Is it enabled? Do we? Oh, that's a good question. I didn't think about that. Yeah. Oh. I don't know. So our log is going to do nothing. It's going to completely ignore it. Question is anything ever going to avoid beginning scope if it's not enabled? And I think the answer is going to be no. So I'm just going to always return false from this. And this is just a minor optimization so that it doesn't build up like this delegate and stuff like this in order to call log if it's not even enabled. So I'm just going to always return false there. And I think that will work. We'll give it a try. Let's see. And then when we come in here to begin this scope, we're going to want to we're going to want to pass this up to like, the parent class. You know what, I'm just going to write this first. Let's say disposable because we're going to want to dispose the scope. I'm going to call it push scope with a T state. And there. And that's what we're going to call. And actually, that's going to be the complete implementation of this. So my provider is going to do push scope as its data. That's it. Let's see. And you know, actually, there's no other state of data here. So really, actually, I could just do one. Create this once and return the same logger every time it's requested. That's an interesting optimization there. Oh, I can't pass this in the static constructor, can I? Oh, that's fine. Passed in. Okay, And now, when we're asked to create a logger, we just don't care at all about the category name because that's just a logging thing. It doesn't affect scopes at all. So I'm just going to forward that to our already created field. And then when we, whatever. Don't care that much about your documentation there. Okay. Need to. Now we're gonna capture now. So this is all boilerplate to create the provider, and whenever it creates a logger to forward back to the provider and all that. And this is the main thing that we need to implement here. Everything else here is just leading up to this one method where we have this state that somebody called begin scope on. And just for simplicity, I'm going to rename this to begin scope. Just to make that, so it's not different. Now we just need to capture the scope. So in order to do that, we're going to say original scope is going to be original scopes, because it's actually a stack of scopes. Actually, I'm going to say our original captured scopes value. Make this really blatant, because some of the things we have to think about is when this is null, we have to act like it's empty, but then when we reset it, when we clear out that scope, we want it to go back to null, not go back to empty. I'll show that in just a minute here. So this is going to be the, let's see, so we have the original value. Now we want the scope stack to be the original captured scopes value or mutable stack empty. Thank you. So we have a non-null stack at this point, and now we want to add the new stack or the new scope to it. So these are immutable, so every time you update it, you have to reassign your variable here. And it takes a scope, and I'm going to give it a scope of t and pass in the state. So we're kind of doing our manual own boxing here with our own scope wrapper. Now this scope stack I want to save in the captured scopes and return a disposable that resets it to this original captured scopes value. Now for disposables, I'm going to use another library that I wrote because it just gives you a way to do disposables very cleanly and easily with multiple thread safety and all of that. You don't have to worry about any of that. Just have to remember what it's called. Anonymous. I'm going to rename this to just be disposable in the next version because, yeah. Anyway, so let's set captured scopes dot value back to the original. There. That's not working. Possible null reference assignment. Well, it can be null. That's strange. Now, one of the problems with nullability is that some of it's just not right. Some of the annotations are not right. I don't see any nullability annotations there. So I'm gonna tell it it's okay. I'm gonna say that's not null, even though it can be null, and we want to set it to null. For some reason, it doesn't want to allow us to set it to null. Nullability with generics in particular is a little bit wonky. What's the problem here? supposed to explicitly implement iDisposable. Fine. Alright, so we've got our logger provider here. That is the first thing that we need. And this should capture all the scopes. Well, the one thing it doesn't do is expose them. So what we want to also do is say we want to do an immutable stack of scope values, current scope, and this will just be the captured scope's value or empty, so that we always return something that's not null. Oh, that one can't be commented. Gets the current stack of scopes. Okay, so and then another part of our code is going to use this to stick this stack of scopes onto the exception. All right, cool. So that's the first big thing there, and this is done, and this is done. Right on. All right. Yeah, let's do this part next, even though it's not directly related to what we just did. It's like another helper type, but let's do, oh man, all right. I've never actually written code that does ephemerons in the real world. Let's see here. Exception scopes. Exception scope data. Exception scope. Call it exception scopes. Sure. And these will be extension methods. Maybe just call it exception extensions. That would be better. That's more of the pattern for that. Boy, exception and extension are way too close in terms. So I want like essentially a getter and a setter here. And the way that I'm going to implement those, I was originally thinking of sticking it on exception.data, but if anything actually tries to log exception.data, that would not be very clean. So I'm thinking of doing it now as an ephemeron. Now ephemerons, I have a library for that, but it's been a long time since I've done that. Let's see here. Ephemerons. I don't know if I can find it up here or not. No. Can't even remember what it's called. Oh, connected properties. Because of course that makes perfect sense. Alright, and I'm going to have to look through this to remind myself how to use it. Okay, so we can, so it's a connected property. Get. Okay. And then there's a, then you've got like a name for it. Okay. Let me add this library in. I really hope it supports net standard. Hopefully it's not that old. Wow. Net standard 1.1. Nice. Okay. Last published, hey, 3 years ago, 3 years and 3 days ago. How about that? Should probably update that a little bit. Give it some nullability checks at least, right? Okay, so I'm going to jump over here to this, to the docs page because I know there's some limitations to carrier objects that I want to, yes, I want to bypass this validation. Just in case someone defines an exception type that uses, that overrides equals. Normally that's something that you can't attach ephemerons to, but in this case it would be okay. So I'm going to, alright, let me jump back to the home page there. Let's see here. So let's look at this. Why not? Oh. What's your API? Oh. Good enough. So we've got this get. Hi. Good morning. How are you doing today? First thing in the morning, yeah. Alright. So let's see. Just get return. No, let's throws an exception. That's not what we want. Do this. Yeah. Do that. So we never want to throw if the scopes are missing here. Hi there. So I want to set it. Alright, this is the, that's the connected property itself. I'm remembering this a little bit more now. Hi. Sweet baby. I think I'm going to use this and see how far we get at least. Okay, so we're going to want a setter here. So we can say set scope, scopes. And what's our type that we captured? We'll just use that same type here. This. Okay, so is this a scope or is it scopes? I think this is going to be scopes. Yeah, we'll do that. So a scope, we're going to end up with a set of scopes, or a stack of scopes, which is scopes. I love you, sweetie. I'm going to create a name here that is only known to this type. This has got to be static. Down to typing with one hand now. What I like to do for this is GUIDs. Let's see. Like this kind, actually. So anything would do. Alright. So now we've got a unique name. I'm probably using some wrong naming or something. Fine. Right. think you can do a try get here, can you? Oh, you can't do you can't bypass validation either. Okay, so I'm gonna have to use a slightly more complicated syntax for this. The exception is our carrier object, because that's the one that's actually going to, it ties a lifetime to that. Our name is scope's name, and we want to bypass validation, yes. And then I'm going to set it. Actually, that's short enough. I'm just going to make it all one line there. Okay. And then we're going to have a way to get it off. And when I get it off, I'm just going to return, should I return an empty immutable stack, or should I return null if it's not there? I think I'm going to return null. I'm going to return null. Try and get scopes. That was quite a yawn. Oops. Okay. Now, in this case, I'm going to want to get that connected property. Same way here. This time I want to do a try get. Sweetie. This API could use a little bit of help, you know, maybe some generic overloads or whatnot, but that's fine. I can make it work. Let's call it that. Okay, so now we can say, oops, ow, if it's not going to retrieve it, button. Then just return null. Otherwise we can, oh yeah, I have nullability checking turned on in this project, so this needs to be nullable. Otherwise return the value as this type, which cat should never fail, but just in case. Oh my. I'm not really being that dogmatic about my XML comments because these are all pub internal types. Pubternal types, I think is the term. Okay, I'm gonna type a little bit here. I always call out in the docs whether I return null or not. Even though we have the new nullability checking, I still like calling it out explicitly. Alright, so at this point, now we have a logger provider that tracks the scopes. We have a way to stick it on and off the exception. Now, there's... okay, so there's a way to... let's see. There is like a first chance exception. Okay, so let's not do the one line registration quite yet. And let's just say, what is this type gonna be? It's gonna end up being like some kind of configuration extensions. I'm just gonna call it exception context. Extensions. Although right now I don't think I'm going to start off with it actually being an extension class. So this one is actually a properly public class, although it is going to be static. And I want, I'll fill this in later when it's more complete. What I want is, let's see, when I register this, I want to register the logging provider. You know, I'm gonna have to tie into that anyway. I may as well just make it a regular register function. Well, you're having fun, aren't you? Alright. Now this is the part that I'm not that familiar with. So we've got a host builder, and this iHost builder comes into configure services, and we want to tie in at this iHost builder level. So this will be an extension for iHost builder. Host builder, which I'm not, yeah, that's not going to be in there yet. Hosting abstractions. Excuse you. Okay. And what do I want to call this? It's like enable. I don't know. How about capture? Capture logging. Capture exception context. Capture logging scopes for exceptions. I don't know. Capture logging context. For exceptions. Sure. We'll call it that. I might rename this before this goes to V1 because I'm not entirely sure about that name, but we'll see what makes sense. Alright. Yeah. So one of the things we want to do is called configure logging, which is not one of the EU. Let's see. We can just configure logging is just another way to call configure services. We got here context services.
Look now.
Oh, yeah, it's off the screen now. Okay, services. And then really all we need is a add singleton from, yeah, it's been a while since I've done this. Let me see, I think we just want an iLogger provider. We want to provide our own, what did I call it? scope tracking logger provider. Does that work? Let me see. So that's the T-service T implementation, but it doesn't tell you which one's which. Okay. No, it's probably fine. Alright. So we're adding our logger provider.
Can you see it?
Yes, you're moving that mouse all around. Awesome.
Eee, give us good at that computer.
Oh. Yeah. Fine. Oh, Visual Studio's taking a nap. Okay. You want some breakfast? No. Okay.
Daddy, watch it.
I see. Yep. You're moving that mouse around, all right. Here, let me move it over here and see what it says. Oh, it's still thinking. All right. Fine. Visual Studio does like its naps, I've noticed. Especially this week, it seems.
I accidentally pressed something without even noticing.
Sometimes that happens to me too.
Huh?
Well, this is interesting. It's really taking a nap. Let me see something. Okay. Yeah. Visual Studio is gone. Gone. I might have to kill it. It is really gone. Okay, little girl. So now, at this point, I think I'm going to turn it over to my...
It looks like there's so many.
Yes. You can see many mouse cursors. Well, I think I'm going to have to kill Visual Studio because it is not coming back at all. Eden, I'm going to have to borrow this.
Okay.
Alright. Bye-bye, VS. It was nice knowing you. Okay. Let's restart that and see how much of our work it lost. Sure.
It's like snowing. Now it's like...
Okay. I don't think it really lost anything there.
Winter.
It's like winter?
It's like winter nighttime. And the light there. It's like winter day. Right?
It is dark today. I've noticed that. Let's see. Enables. Wow. Not sure what's going on here. Okay. Enables. I'm going to say that this captures. Wow. Yeah, this computer is something else here. captures. Logging scopes at the time exceptions are thrown and applies those scopes to when those when nope, don't be doing that, please. Actually, I'm going to say when exceptions are thrown. And applies those scopes when exceptions are logged. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? And the other thing that we need to do is there's like an app domain first chance exception thing. So this current domain, no, don't press that button, please. Hey-yo. Hey, first chance exception. That's what it's actually called. Awesome. All right. You know what? I want to. I definitely want to remove that. Probably when the logger provider is.
What's that hammer?
Oh, that's to help you organize your code, I guess. Unsubscribe. Unsubscribe when that's done. So let's see what we've got here. Probably a. No. Why would I want bind ops? Oh, right. Of course, it's the old school args thing. Fine. Args.exception. Yes. This is the one that's thrown. So before it actually gets thrown, it should raise this exception actually at the point when it's being thrown, but before the stack is unwound. So this is the perfect time to capture. And I'm going to tie that in. What's my capture thing that I called? I forget. Exception extensions. Oh, so it's extensions on exception.
Can I type on the computer without the clear?
No, you can't type on the computer right now.
Without the clear?
Without the clear? I'm not sure what that means.
Without the plain white.
Yeah, because that's per instance, isn't it? You know, I'm going to have to... I'm going to have to actually create an instance, which I'm going to want to do anyway because I think that this instance is going to unsubscribe from this event. Or you know what? I could do that in the actual constructor and destructor here. I think I'm going to do that. Do it that way. We'll do it that way. So let's, sorry, baby. Let's jump over here. And yes, this is where we want to do it. All right. So okay, so this is nicer because then we have like an unsubscribe capability right here with this dispose. Okay, so I want to say set scopes to my current scopes, and actually that doesn't even have to be public anymore, does it? Not sure. Do I want that tied in that much? I think so. Well, would a logging provider that tracks scopes be useful without attaching them to exceptions? I don't know. It's a problem for another day. All right. No, don't. No, you can't do that, Speedy. All right. See, so we're going to set the scopes when the exception's thrown, and then I want to unsubscribe from this. Sorry, let me see this here for a moment. event handler, first chance exception event errors. Okay.
Let me see.
Now,
What's this thing running away?
now I actually have something to do with in my dispose, which will be nice. Okay, that's just to be clean. Most of the time, I don't think that's really going to be necessary. But anyway, I think I can clean that. All right, so that's just to clean up that subscription. So now when it's created by dependency injection, it should automatically hook that in. Now we're actually tracking scopes, getting scopes onto the exceptions. The last piece of the puzzle is to apply those scopes when those exceptions are logged. Excuse me. No, let go. Okay. So now we need to. What do we need to do? The way I want to do this is to actually create a logging provider wrapper that reapplies those scopes. Okay, I'm gonna take this, sweetie. Just for a minute. Just for a minute. Let's see here. So what do we want to call this logging provider? So this is a scope applying, I don't know, logging provider wrapper, and this is like sounding really enterprisey at this point, but sure.
Where is it?
I don't know where it went now.
Daddy, watch this.
Now this is going to have an inner logger provider.
What's this? What's this?
No, you gotta keep it on here, sweetie.
Hey, get it.
There. Alright. Let's do... And this is going to take an inner provider. Now, when it creates a logger, yeah, it's going to have to create an inner logger too. Okay, fine.
Oh, hey. Oh,
So we've got this wrapping inner logger. And now when we do, so is enabled, just delegate straight through.
wow.
Same thing with begin scope. You don't actually care about that. It's the log method where we want to apply these. So for now, I was there's some edge cases that I'm not going to handle right now, but I want to handle in the future. And as a reminder, I'm thinking like if you have an exception that's thrown, then you can catch it, throw a different kind of exception with that original exception as an inner exception. What we actually want is the scopes from the inner exception. Oh boy, this is going to be a little bit complicated how to get all those scopes put together. But this is where I want to start doing unit tests. So for now, I'm just going to do pull it straight off the exception, if it has one. So let's see.
Whatever I did.
Whatever that was, yeah.
Whatever I did.
Whatever you did. I don't know what it was.
It's something today.
You know, I still want to move that app domain
Can I have
out of the
some
scope log. It just seems wrong. No, you need breakfast, sweetie. But I won't do that yet. That's just a refactor that can be done anytime. So this is just going to forward to a new logger, and it's going to wrap the inner providers to an iLogger. That should be fine. Is it time for some breakfast?
It's time for s'mores.
It's time for s'mores. It's a nice wintry looking day outside. Okay, fall looking day. Alright, so no, we don't want those here. Put them out of the way. Alright. Now we need to reapply the scopes. And this is the problem. I always get them mixed up which direction to apply them, but I'll have unit tests for that too. Alright, I'm just going to do it one way for now, and hopefully it's the right way. If not, I will reverse it later. Alright, so we're going to get the scopes off the exception here by saying exception. These are exception extensions, so it's get scopes. Try get scopes. I did that. Now, if it's, I was thinking of how to do this. If they're not null, then we want to apply them. I'm going to say there's another type in my disposables library that it's like a compound disposable, and I can't remember what it's called. It might be called compound disposable. It is not. Collection disposable. It's a collection of disposables. Oh. What?
But you have to type and I know.
Well, because I'm doing the coding this morning. You can type on my computer in a little bit. I'll be done shortly. I'm just going to do this proof of concept, push out a pre-release, and then, you know, I'm not going to work much more on this.
And then it's my turn to type.
Then it'll be your turn to type. Yes.
Remember
Why don't you get some breakfast?
The white space.
The white space? Remember the white space?
To type on.
Okay. Oh, notepad. Yes, that white space. Okay. Yeah, I'll remember the white space. All right. we should be able to just do a, let me see, we're going for each one of these we're going to want to create a new scope. The question is this array backwards or not? And I'm not sure.
I want Quaker Oats, squares, and yogurt.
You want Quaker Oat squares and yogurt?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Could you get that for her, Mommy?
Yeah.
Okie doke. Have fun at breakfast. Okay. So anyway, yes, so this collection disposable, you can just add to it dynamically, which is useful in this kind of exact scenario. No, we want to the inner logger begin scope and pass it in. That's no, we want the not scope. We want the scope's value, and we can't get to it. That's right. Okay, so let me see. There, I can extend this type here and say begin this scope for any particular kind of logger. Applies this scope to the logger. And what are you complaining about? Oh, it is private, isn't it? For some reason I was thinking that was an interface. Could be an interface. Probably should be an interface. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Alright. Now here, okay, oh, right, of course we need an override there. Now, so this one is going to do logger begin scope, and it's going to pass in the value directly. There. Perfect. Now we have this way to apply any scope value. So now, I actually don't want to call begin scope directly. I want to call scope begin and pass in the inner logger. And that should reestablish all of those scopes, possibly in an inverted order, because I can never remember if stacks are enumerated top to bottom or bottom to top. So it might be backwards, but that would be an easy fix if it is. Alright, now we've got that using disposable in there, and then we can call the inner logger.log, and at this point we just pass in everything, since those scopes have been reapplied. I think that's everything. Alright. Hey. Let's toss on a couple of XML comments and we are ready to test this thing. Oh wait, I need to actually wrap all the other logging providers with this one. A logging provider wrapper that applies scopes attached to exceptions. It just sounds so complicated. It's not really that complicated. Okay. Now here's the other place where I want to just make sure I can build. I've done a lot of coding before I've built. That was a lot of coding. Alright, looks good. Alright, so the other thing that I want to do with this configure services is actually take all the existing services that are iLogger providers and replace them with wrapped iLogger providers. That is not going to work the way I thought it would, because the services collection is just a collection of how to create the things. It's not a collection of the instances themselves. I'm wondering. This is okay, so this might end up being a little bit more complicated than I thought. I think just for testing, I want to get this tested. I want to at least do a manual test here. Make sure that this works. Get some validation. So for now, I'm going to leave that as is. Come over here to my test program. Got the default builder. I don't actually have probably don't even have a reference to that. That would help. Okay, now it's able to find it for me. Thank you. It's thinking about it. So I think here I could just use, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm looking to create default binder, and I'm just going to override exactly what that has for now. As soon as Visual Studio wakes up. Okay, PS. You are having a bad day. Alright, where was I? Oh yeah, that's where I was. Visual Studio was locking up on me. Alright. No questions in the chat yet. Fair enough. Wow, this is just getting ridiculous. Come on, I just want to test out the one thing. You can do it. Maybe not. I'll try this again. Give it a moment between retries here. And go nice and slow for you. Oh yeah, you started up, but are you really ready? I'll wait. Doesn't look like you're ready yet. Doesn't look like it. No, no, not ready. Well, I don't know if VS Code, I don't have it set up for this kind of thing. I don't have it set up for any kind of that should be the Nito, not in the sub namespace, but that's fine. And we'll see. VS, still not responsive. Okay. I wonder if I could run this. I never actually tried to do that. So this won't actually work yet. I'm just wondering if I can. No, okay. Never mind. I can always run it from the command line. I know how to do that. No waste, I think. Maybe. It's thinking. Yeah. I'd be looking at a full reboot at this point. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it's still not working, but that's because I didn't wrap the logging provider. And what I wanted to do was use Visual Studio to dive into this code. Yeah, okay. You know, tells me what it does. Use the logger factory to log to the console, debug an event source. Okay, well, let me see. You back, Visual Studio? Okay. I tell you. Because VS can dive right into the source that's on GitHub. And that just saves me the problem of finding it on GitHub. Alright, so let's see here. We've got configure logging. Blah, 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 add console. I just want to see how this is done. Try enumerable singleton logger provider to console logger provider. Okay, easy enough. So all I need to do is find any that are registered with this service type. Remove it and add it, you know, bleh. Okay, well, let's see here. There's a replace, but I don't know how it is. Okay, it is there. Replace. With the same service type as descriptor. Yeah, that's actually not what I want to do. That's not going to work. I can't do a replace. I'm going to have to... Actually, I want to remove a specific kind of service descriptor. It's going to be singleton of iLogger provider to console logger. That'll remove the one that that is defined, and then this is just a hack for now, because all this logic is going to end up going in here. This is just a test to make sure it's working, and then I want to add in a singleton of iLogger provider. Hi. Did you finish your breakfast? All right. I'm almost done here too. I'm just gonna
Hooray!
do this test. Yeah. Then you get to type. That's right.
And the white space. The
On the white space. Yep. In Notepad. Yes.
the field. Hey, I made a D!
Hmm.
I made a D there. See?
You did what?
A D.
A D. All right. I'm just gonna new it up for now. Total hack, but it'll work.
Daddy, watch.
Scope applying log provider wrapper. I'm gonna pass it a new console
Plus,
logger provider with those options.
1 plus 4. 1 plus
I don't know if that'll work.
4.
1 plus 4. Good job. Yeah. It might be easier to do a generic type here. I'm trying to think of all the limitations of Microsoft's dependency injection. So you can't. Boy, I've got some code. That I might use temporarily. I just have to remember how it works. Excuse me, sweetie. Dependency injection. No repositories, really? I know, go on.
You.
It is me. So this, yeah. I'm just gonna rip the code out of here. Just can't remember what the thing is called.
Daddy.
Activator utilities create instance.
Daddy.
Yes.
Is a Chihuahua is a girl.
Are all Chihuahuas girls?
Mm-hmm.
No, both Chihuahuas can be girls or boys. Gotta pass in the provider first.
I wish we could have a brown Chihuahua, which is a girl with its own little pink clothes on.
You want a girl brown Chihuahua with pink clothes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With its own pink clothes on.
We will think about that.
Let's get to one when it's time.
Interesting. What if get connected properties return
I
no
love
lowercase?
Chihuahua.
You love Chihuahuas?
Mm-hmm. Huh?
Okay. No?
But I want some summer things.
You want some summer things?
Summer things.
Oh, no, not right now, sweetie. Okay, so I think it
Saturday.
can return null, actually. It's just not
It's
very well documented.
Saturday.
Yeah, it'll return null, alright. Did not know that. Okay. Been a while since I've used connected
Saturday,
properties.
December 20.
Alright. Where was that exception? No, don't press buttons, please. Do not turn it off. I'm streaming right now. No, don't turn it off.
You need to go on the next one.
Mm-mm.
I'm going to turn this into Daddy.
Okay. See where that was. It was right here. No. Here we go.
How much more?
Thing is, I don't know why it
How
would
much
return
more?
no there. It shouldn't.
How much more?
How much more?
Mm-hmm.
Not too long. I don't know exactly because I'm debugging right now. Oh no! You gonna fall? Are you gonna fall?
Mm.
Spell it out for you. Alright. Let's see here. Thing is, I don't know why that's null. That's odd. Oh. Well, it can't be null. Exception? Exception is null.
Mm.
Ah ha ha, of course exception's null. Silly me. Okay. Yeah, because that can never be null. Well, I guess it could be null. Could it? It could be null if the exception wasn't thrown. So I'm going to leave that check in there. Now, exception is what's null, which actually means our wrapping provider is calling this on a null exception. So
Try
I'm going
to
say,
get scoops.
try get scopes, yes.
Scoops.
Scoops.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That should fix that exception. You okay? There we go. Well, it looks like we're getting some extra logs. That's interesting.
Daddy, watch this.
I don't look right at all. Yes, you are drawing. Okay. Interesting. Looks like we've got, I think that this is all the configuration stuff because it looks like the original console logger is still in there and the
Daddy.
new console logger is not including scopes, so it's not seeing its options.
What's this?
That's what I'm guessing. Wow, what a weird result.
It's something. Oh, wait.
Hmm.
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 I think it's some kind of red cage.
Okay. So let me double check what I did over here.
It's not cage.
Removed that one. Was it actually removed? Double check what.
It's a
builder
red.
sets up here.
It's a red kind of cage. But what is it? Oh, what is that? I think I saw a squirrel going that way outside.
First script do that singleton. Edge.
Search!
Should be the same thing.
Search!
Yes, it says type here to search. Logger provider.
Search, Daddy,
Console logger
search.
provider. No, I'm not going to search right now. I know what numeral means. Maybe that's the difference here.
Eat.
No, don't play with that.
I will.
You will?
But I will type on your computer soon.
Yes, you will. Soon. Okay, so before it's removed, we've got an iLogger.
That's my bees.
iLogger provider. And it's at number 22. When we remove it, it should be removed. Let's see. 22. It's not removed. I don't know. Weird.
Let me in. I said
Okay,
that to
so
Steven.
I don't know why that remove isn't actually working, but I'm gonna just gonna remove. There is a way to. Come on. There. Okay. Okay. This is just a hack anyway. Services first or default. X dot service type is iLogger provider. And actually we don't even need that. We just want the implementation of console logger provider and you're gone.
Time.
Implementation type. Now let's remove that one. I don't know if it's adding copies or what. That may be what it is, actually. So it's creating a new service descriptor, and if they're compared by reference equality, then that's not going to find it and remove. So now that should be
right.
It says, "Hooray! The chat is waiting for new messages."
I
Okay, that worked. Except now we're not getting any
know. The chat is
things at all.
messages.
I'm not sure. Why not? Because the console include scopes is set. The activator should be pulling in. Okay. The activator should be pulling in the options. You know, just to make this work right now, I'm gonna see if I can new this up after all. Excuse me. Here, console log provider. You really need the options monitor. The options are such a mess.
When
I just
can I
pass
type
in.
on your computer?
No, I can't just pass in the options.
When
Okay.
can I type on your computer?
When I'm done, sweetie, I gotta figure out this last thing, okay?
What is it?
Well, for some reason the replacement console logger provider is not getting the options that it needs to set. If I could set it after it's been activated. return of console logger provider. Can I dot into that? No. Alright. It's all private. Okay. Well, then, in that case...
My turn?
No, I still have to figure it out. The way that I thought I could figure it out is not going to work. Let me see. So we've got... I don't know why it's not getting through. Why it's not picking up those options. Wow, I wonder if I could hack it like this then. Let's do...
When it's my turn, I'll say
This might just be the same thing.
happy and sad, and mad and sad, and also, do you know how I am? And I would say, I am 4.
You were 4?
Mm-hmm.
Still not getting that, I guess I could just debug into it and prove that it is getting wrapped, but I have to work on this dependency injection part in order to actually make it usable. I think I'll just do that for now, and then let Eden type. Does that sound good?
On the white space.
On the white space, yes. Okay, so I'm just going to debug into it and see if it works. Oops. No, it does not work. Oh, that's because exception is null. Right, because that's the first message. Second message exception is null. Third message exception is our test exception. It does pull the scopes off. And then we are able to just add the scopes to that and then call the inner logger log. So it is actually working, but for some reason that I've got the something with my replacement dependency injection is not right, where this inner console logging provider is not getting the configuration that should be for the console logger provider. And I'm not sure what that is. I'll have to look into that and see how I can wrap these properly. But for now, this is a decent enough place to leave off. And I'm going to push all the code up.
We should
Enjoy.
start making bacon pizza.
We should start making bacon pizza?
Mm-hmm.
Bacon pizza sounds pretty good.
We have had it at Grandma Clary's.
Oh yes, Grandma Cleary likes the bacon pizza. Okay, well thanks for
Me
tuning
too.
in. I'm going to sign off now and let Eden type. You want to type, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, we will see you sometime later.
Who is it?
Oh, some people are watching us. I don't know who.